In the gospel narrative, there is a very peculiar and unique narrative of Jesus being led into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And in that narrative, we see some incredible, I guess, teleportation events of bringing Jesus to the top of the temple and then to the top of the mountain. How would you see this in light of the Tanakh, where Jesus and the devil actually have conversations and in a temptation and having these kinds of fantastic movement?
It's a really unusual question. So there's nothing remotely like this in the Jewish scriptures. The point of the Messiah is that he is someone who fears God and doesn't judge after the sight of his eyes. The story of a temptation could not also exist in the book of John because John's Christology won't permit it. It's too high. John's Christology presents Jesus as being so high in the prologue that you couldn't possibly have Jesus tempted, and therefore you won't find it in the book of John. In the Synoptic Gospels, you find the Jesus being tempted, but the temptations make very little sense. I mean, this is the second person of the Trinity, and he's worried about being hungry and turning a rock into stone. Like, what is being offered here? Now the temptations contradict each other, but there's just nothing remotely like it in the Tanakh, but there's a lot like it in Greek literature, in Greek tragedies, where the hero is brought into a desperate position in life, and these sort of demigods have to choose a suffering and withhold their own temptation in order to demonstrate that they are great and special. What would be the temptation for God to not be able to eat, or to show his alliance to Satan, or to... None of it makes any sense. If you're God, how are these even temptations? They play well in the Greek tragedy theater that we find in the mythology that was all over the Greco-Roman world, but it's completely alien to Tanakh. In Tanakh, the Mashiach is the king who is a descendant of King David, who is someone that all the nations will follow, will listen to his rebuke. See the first 5 passages of Isaiah chapter 2. It would change your view completely. See the first 4 passages of Isaiah chapter 11. See Zechariah chapter 9, verse 10. There's nothing remotely like this. And moreover, there's nothing remotely like these passages in the story of Jesus, because if Jesus, in fact, was able to rebuke the nations and war would have come to an end, we would have known it now. Jesus is not the Messiah, couldn't possibly have been the Messiah, because he did all the things that the Messiah is not supposed to do, according to the Gospels, and he didn't do a thing that the Messiah is supposed to do. Isn't that odd? He fulfills non-existent prophecies, and he fulfills no existing prophecies. Nothing. And yet we are told in the Gospels that Jesus is a fulfillment of the Torah, the prophets, and the writings in Luke 24:44. Think about that for a moment. Everything we are told Jesus did and fulfilled have some features about them. They're not found in the Jewish Bible. He's not supposed to feed people his blood and body. He's not supposed to be tempted by the devil. Nowhere. He's not supposed to die on a cross and resurrect on the 3rd day. And when Paul in First Corinthians 15 says that Jesus rose from the dead on the third day, according to the scripture, you'll notice that he doesn't provide a scripture because it doesn't exist. Like, why doesn't he quote the passage? There is no such passage. I mean, this is like the most famous passage in all of Paul's writings, where he says that Jesus was in the tomb for 3 days and rose on the third day, according to the scripture, and there's no scripture provided because the scripture doesn't exist. Some Bibles will say it's a quote of Hosea 6. Hosea 6 has nothing to do with this. It's fake. The church has to take into account that everything Jesus did is, number one, unverifiable. That's okay, unverifiable. Can't test it. Why is that important? There are a lot of things that happen in Tanakh that's unverifiable. Abraham encountering 3 angels who he thinks are travelers are unverifiable. But everything that the Messiah is supposed to do, Jesus fails at doing. He doesn't destroy Satan, doesn't destroy evil in the world. If he would have brought about a worldwide peace, which is explicitly in the first 5 chapters of Isaiah 2, explicitly in Isaiah chapter 11, explicitly in Ezekiel 37, we would know about it today. That's the point. If he would have brought about the resurrection of the dead, as expressed in Isaiah 26 and Daniel 12 as an example, we would know about it today. If he had brought about the building of the temple, we would know about it today. See, so all the messianic this is why it's germane. It's not that every single event in Tanakh could be verified today, but every single messianic prophecy in Tanakh would be verifiable. That's the point. And the only thing that Jesus, we are told, did are things that we have no way of knowing whether he did it or not. He came into Jerusalem on a donkey or 2 donkeys. It would not be remarkable if he never did. We would have no way of knowing that today. If he did that today, we would know because there's presumably closed-circuit TV of that whole region. But then there wouldn't be. So notice he did things that there's no way to verify it. Tempted by the devil. It doesn't make sense that God would be tempted. We're even told in the Christian Bible that God can't be tempted, although Hebrews says that Jesus was tempted in all things so that he could be a proper servant, which makes no sense at all. Why would the creator of the heavens and the earth be tempted by any of these things? So the story doesn't make sense. It makes a little bit more sense when you view the Gospels as portraying Jesus as something less than divine. Then these can begin to make a little bit of sense, but not if you believe in the Trinity. So this is what I want to highlight. All the messianic prophecies, worldwide peace, nations abandoning their implements of war, converting them into implements of agriculture, peace between nations. We'd know it today. Building of a final temple that would stand forever in Jerusalem. See the last 3 passages of Ezekiel 37. See Ezekiel 40 through 48. So look it up for yourself. If he had done that, we would know it. Is this just a coincidence that everything he did are things that are unfalsifiable, and everything he didn't do would be unfalsifiable? Is that a coincidence? Of course not, because these stories are all nonsense. And then you could argue from silence all you want, but you can predict so many things about the book of John. Because the book of John is portraying Jesus in the highest Christology, you can predict that there would be no transfiguration, no mountain where there's a transfiguration in the book of John. Why? Why could you predict that? You could look it up later, but why could you predict that? Because in John, Jesus is so high he doesn't need to have a conversation with Moses and Elijah in order to make him look good. He's way up there. So the story doesn't appear in the book of John. You can predict these things. This is science. Would Jesus need to be baptized in the book of John with such a high Christology? Think about it. The answer is no. Why would he need to be baptized? Moreover, the baptizer is always greater than the one who's being baptized. So that becomes awkward, and the synoptics will try to deal with that in putting words in the mouth of John the Baptist. But in the book of John, it's just not there. Jesus is not being baptized by anyone. You can predict that you won't find it anywhere there. And then, in fact, not find it. So that every one of these algorithms I'm sharing with you, you can then take and then apply. You would not expect any emphasis on Mary, the mother of Jesus, in the book of John. Why not? Because his mother isn't important in the book of John. You can therefore, if I ask you the question of the four Gospels, in which do we not find Mary, Jesus' mother's name, mentioned anywhere, without looking it up, based on the algorithm, based on the information, based on the equation, based on what I've shared with you, you can predict that if her name is found nowhere in one of the four Gospels, you can predict with confidence it would be the book of John. Right? So the stories contradict each other. That means, what is the test? I think people get too obsessed with what exactly the test, what order are the tests. They differ. I would encourage you to ignore that and rather focus on the New Testament inventing stories to have Jesus fit a mythological pattern that was commonplace in the Greco-Roman mind, but not in the Hebrew mind, and does not comport with the doctrine of the Trinity. God couldn't possibly be tempted, and we even find that in the Christian Bible itself. Great question. Thank you.